Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Saracen. Here's what we'll be talking about today. I'll briefly show you how outsourcing has a mixed track record and highlight what we think are the main causes of the failure to deliver expected results. I'll show you how the formal vested methodology can drive better results, how it can be applied beyond just vested agreements, which is the most collaborative form of commercial agreement, but there are other relational agreements where it applies equally well. I'll show you an open source methodology to work out which is the right deal with the right supplier for what you're trying to achieve. And I'll explain how the RF partner process is a competitive process that is efficient and effective to acquire complex services. And I'll sum up what I think are the key things I will have shared with you today. Please reach out to me directly if you have any questions or if there's something you want to discuss. Close your eyes and think of the worst customer or the worst supplier you ever dealt with. They turned up late, they did bad work, they didn't finish the job, they overcharged, they didn't pay, or whatever it was. The chances are you had the wrong trading partner or were in the wrong deal. You can open your eyes again now. This generally happens because the selection process failed. The right questions were not answered honestly, or you did not know what you were trying to do. Think of the deal Montenegro struck with the Chinese suppliers to build and finance 165 kilometers of road across the country. Today, only 41 kilometers have been built. The project's late, the budget consumed, and Montenegro's new government is unable to make payments. The contractor is threatening to take possession of the country's crown jewel, the Adriatic port of Bar, in lieu of payment. And the contract says they can. And the contract says the disputes will be arbitrated in China. Not a great deal when you think each of those parties were thinking, hey, I think we really managed to pull the wool over their eyes. I'm going to give you some tools to avoid these all too frequent problems in outsourcing. Working out what you want done, finding a deal that will work for both parties, even as things change, finding the right supplier. Today, we're going to focus on the buyer's side and how they deal with service providers. Most of these insights work also for the selling relationship. And I've done a lot of work supporting RF partner deals on the sell side. So let's look at why outsourcing is more and more important. And you see in this graph that the services portion hasn't changed that much. It's grown with everything else. But the complex services have really grown. And getting the right deal with the right supplier is even more important today because we're buying more and more complex services, and in particular gas or goods as a service, where you're delivering a result rather than an arm's length transaction like janitorial services. The classic example of this is the Rolls-Royce power by the hour sale of jet engines. Customers only pay for the actual use of jets on their aircraft. Before, they bought the engines outright and handled all of the financing, conditional, preventive, break fix maintenance themselves. But the power by the hour deal means both parties have to cooperate to ensure the requirements are met while ensuring safe, reliable, functional through proper maintenance and operation and residual value preservation so that when they no longer need that jet engine, it's still worth something. So that's why complex services are becoming more and more important, and I think it's going to increase. This is research by the University of Tennessee that identified why outsourcing relationships did not meet their expectations. Unclear expectations. But bear in mind, it's impossible to meet a standard that has not been defined. One of the most critical things is going to be defining and agreeing on expectations. Misaligned interests, where parties want different things from the relationship and there's no overlap. Ineffective decision-making, which is neither timely nor based on all the facts or not in the interests of both parties. Poor communication or failure to share important information truthfully and in a timely manner. Lack of equity in the relationship, unfair shares of burdens and profits, disappointing performance through the wrong priorities or insufficient focus, or just plain bad cultural fit. bad chemistry, people who don't like working together. It boils down to parties that fail to work together effectively over the long term. Today, I'll give you the tools to set up the environment so these shortcomings can be addressed. Independent research by the IACCM, or now the World Contracting and Commerce, show a very similar story why commercial relationships do not perform. And they've identified these 10 contracting pitfalls. Those that are particularly relevant to outsourced services are these ones here. Failure to agree on scope and objectives, top cause of contracts failing to perform as expected. Ineffective stakeholder engagement and post-award governance to keep interests aligned over time. Focus on risk allocation and not risk management and benefit realization. They estimate that 9.2% of contract value is lost. 9.2%. In complex outsourcing, that's even higher. So it's a very expensive problem and it's well worth solving. This caricature of the traditional buyer-supplier relationship is the view of many tactical agreements. You get what you put into them, which is not much. It's every man for himself, as they say. But seen in a different light, when you're trying to do something strategically important for you, you either succeed together or fail together. And this is back from the early 20th century, so it's not exactly a new way of thinking. We see the issue today as a failure to recognize the intrinsic interdependency. It's not realistic to think that you can just bring in another supplier if this one doesn't work out. Traditional thinking works fine for arm's length transactional relationships, and that's what so many organizations have had for so long. But in complex services, very different mindset is required. Goods are the service, you're delivering an outcome, you're not delivering a product. And that's the premise for today. The premise for today is how we find the right deal with the right supplier when you want to achieve something critical that you cannot or do not choose to attempt alone. Traditional transaction approaches don't work. We already saw the results. Many highly sophisticated organizations have adopted Vested, but Vested is not a household name. And the results that are achieved are very specific to each relationship. So companies like FedEx, like UPS, like Schenker, like Microsoft, like Compass, like Aramark, like ISS, like Accenture, like NTT, some of the companies that are using vested deals to deliver exceptional results. Many of the deals are not in the public domain for competitive reasons. They don't want to tell you what they've achieved. There are also examples of more modest-sized organizations that use these principles successfully. So as we go through today's session, you'll see that Vested lays a solid foundation of trust and alignment that allow you to navigate the pitfalls and ailments that we just saw and that plague too many complex services. So let's talk about the 5 rules. They are deceptively simple, but outcome-based. Articulate what you really want to achieve. Do you want a drill to drill a hole, or do you want to hang a picture? Vested is about hanging the picture, and maybe you don't need a hole to do it. The what, not how. When you engage with an expert that does what you want done all day, every day, and has developed carefully honed skills, capabilities, and tools, don't try to tell them how to do their job. Tell them what makes it special and difficult for you, and let them work out the best possible way to get it done. The University of Tennessee research also identified the ailments that plague unsuccessful outsourcing relationships. They call them penny wise and pound foolish. It's about focus, often focusing on the high cost elements, ignoring the low cost but high potential opportunities. Quite simply, taking the low bidder when superior capability is what you must have. The outsourcing paradox is where the buyer describes the task in great detail and bids and rebids for the lowest possible price. They get cheap services, but they cannot achieve exceptional outcomes. The activity trap drives activity with transaction-based compensation. The more they do, the more they get paid, irrespective of any true value delivered. The Junkyard Dog Factor arises when the team that used to perform the work in-house is tasked with determining the scope and oversight of the services. Result, redundant activities and supplier micromanagement. The honeymoon effect, where the supplier strives to make a great first impression, but then attention waves and the A players move on. So start with a bang and finish with a whimper. Sandbagging is the counterpart of the honeymoon effect when you have performance thresholds. Once you reach a threshold, you get an incentive. There's limited incentive to outperform. So we suggest using continuous incentives with various steps. The zero-sum game arises when you believe that if something is good for the other guy, it must be bad for me. Grow the pie. Driving blind disease is not measuring what you're trying to achieve. Measurement minutia is equally unhelpful as the staff drown in a sea of metrics of every possible item. That can be useful operationally to run the operation, but the relationship must focus on a higher order of issue. And the power of not doing is where great investments have been made and then they're not being used. It could be scorecards with great analysis that could happen, but nobody looks at them and no action is taken. The new sheriff in town is when a new boss comes in, doesn't understand or agree with what the vested relationship was trying to achieve, cuts the initiative to the bone and gets it advanced and gets a quick win. Strategic drift is when priorities change and the service is no longer aligned with the new direction. Executive involvement in governance can drive continuous realignment so that they follow as directions change. Each of the 5 rules is very important. If you focus on the transactions and not the desired outcomes, you risk a certain number of outsourcing ailments, as you can see in the yellow box. If you get bogged down trying to tell a highly qualified expert how to do the job, you'll probably see the provider doing the things that make them money. If you fail to clearly define and agree what success looks like, you may find you're spending all your time fretting about irrelevant details, chasing mice while the elephants roam free. If the management of the relationship is not focused on what will make the arrangement successful, but rather irrelevant details of control, several consequences shown in the yellow box may result. And again, they're not good. If the parties do not work together to mutual benefit, supporting each other and fixing issues rather than fixing blames, these are the consequences they will probably suffer. Working together is knowing what's in it for we mindset. Vested has taken these 5 rules and designed 10 contractual artifacts that together drive better outcomes. This methodology is an open source approach. If you're willing to put the effort into learning how to use it, you'll be more effective in finding and delivering the right deals with the right suppliers. And I don't mean just vested. This approach works for all complex services. Each of the 5 rules underpin a set of contractual elements that must be developed to set the relationship up for success. And you will need these or something like it for any complex service agreement. But they've been coined this way in the open source methodology. So they are briefly an aligned business model where both parties want the same kind of relationship and economic models. And we'll get into that in just a moment. A shared vision and agreed behaviors that build trust and drive positive collaboration. We call this a statement of intent. How the vision translates into specific measurable improvements and how the scope of the agreement helps ensure the right parties focus on the right tasks to achieve the right results. Performance metrics that objectively measure how outcomes are being achieved. How will performance against the desired outcomes be measured and rewarded? A pricing model that captures the full cost picture and rewards exceptional performance with strong incentives. A relationship management framework that ensures the right decisions are made at the right level, including a comprehensive joint risk management plan. A plan to achieve transformative results, a plan for how the relationship will be disbanded when the relationship has run its course. At a time when everyone's well disposed and can plan with cool heads to ensure an orderly and equitable exit. And then other considerations are handled in this final section, like how external changes will be handled. Unexpected disruptions are handled in the relationship, using the guiding principles, the intended behaviors, and aligning to the desired outcomes. Let's talk about how you decide what type of deal you want. The first of the 10 elements. In Strategic Sourcing in the New Economy, the authors posit that you can do this by considering two dimensions. One is the economic model and one is the relational model. I think this is a very effective way of ensuring an effective conversation between procurement and the business. Too many procurement people I have seen get stuck trying to squeeze the lowest cost at the lowest apparent risk to their organization. And this is appropriate in many cases, but not necessary for complex services. I believe this is because the users and their procurement colleagues are not able to talk about what they really want. So the default is cheapest. Cheapest is easy to measure. So the economic model, or what you want financially out of the deal, can take several forms. Transactional is like buying a national brand of chewing gum from a convenience store. The price is defined, the quality is set by the market. Consumer protection laws address most risks. Output-based could be paying a call center for a number of calls. It's important to define a minimum level of quality that must be maintained, or you could have a lot of unsatisfactory calls. Outcome-based is where you pay the supplier for a result. They work out how to achieve it, like reducing the cost without noticeably reducing the quality of the service. Use the criteria on the right to select the model that best fits your requirement. The relationship model helps clarify the way you want to buy, what level of dependency you're willing to assume in order to obtain greater results, using the criteria on the right. In a transaction mode, you pay, you own the product or service, often with an implicit warranty, and that's it. In a relational contract, the emphasis is working over a longer term, where joint planning can reduce uncertainty and costs, and where a well-qualified supplier will bring not only market best practices, but innovation best practices just for you. There may even be dedicated investments made on the basis of sustained stream of business. And then joint ventures and shared services go beyond a commercial relationship, where investments are highly strategic and must be protected, or very, very company specific, and there's no market to develop that. So those are the two dimensions. If you bring them together, you get a 3x3 matrix. In fact, I think if you are able to use this, it helps become obvious what is the right model for you, from an arm's length one-off transaction to an internally integrated shared service center or strategic joint venture, or anything in between. And I think this can help bridge the gap between deciding what the user wants, what will make them successful, and how procurement works, trying to get them that deal. It'll also give you a framework to approach the make or buy decision. Most traditional relationships will be transactional. That corner down there. But as we buy more and more complex services, the other models become significant. I would like you to note that some of these strategies are just not viable. With a transactional outlook on the relationship, collaborative and gain risk sharing will simply not be effective. Now, if you lay those 7 viable sourcing models out horizontally, you can look at the characteristics of each of these models. You'll be a lot more successful if you ensure that all of your choices are internally consistent across the same model. That's to say, you use all of the elements in the same vertical stack. And for more on this work, you could see my article in the February 2021 issue of SCM Now. But now you know what kind of deal you're looking for. How do you find the right supplier? That's where RFP partner process comes in. But first, let's look at some of the options. Running a competitive procurement process is a challenging task. Over time, several processes have been developed to bring objectivity and rigor to the selection of the best supplier. For transactional deals, the right supplier is often defined by their ability to do what is to be done, sustainability of the solution, will it last as long as you need it, and the cost. And procurement generally does a great job of running procurement, competitive RFQs and RFPs. I'm going to focus today on those situations where you have determined that managing the relationship in a collaborative manner serves your needs. The preferred performance-based and vested model we just looked at. We call these relational contracts. The research aimed at finding a balanced approach that assessed both the cultural fit between the two organizations and the quality of the initial solution design and capabilities. That's a significant consideration, is the bidder's effort required, because this drives up bidding costs and may chase away some very capable providers who just don't want to spend that kind of money and effort. And if the process is too onerous on your evaluation team, the process risks being prematurely closed before all the key issues have been investigated, which leads to a suboptimal decision. So we have to balance the effort with the depth of insight we're going to get. And if you don't, you guessed it, the wrong deal with the wrong supplier. So all of these processes recognize that the service provider is the expert. Some are more or less effective at engaging the buyers in the solution design, which can be particularly problematic when you're dealing with high integration or where the buyer wants input into the solution design. So you must validate any assumption you made on how the best solution can be designed and how much dialogue is going to be necessary with your internal stakeholders. So let's look at that. The European competitive dialogue process places an emphasis on the technical solution. Providers solution with the buyer's staff after a comprehensive brief and data room. A lot of work, it's expensive, it limits participation to large and highly motivated players with no assurance of return. So it drives self-selection by the intent to bid. It also drives a once and for all selection design mindset that can front load investment and limit flexibility as the situations change. So it's an expensive and arduous bid process. The best value, or the performance information procurement system out of Arizona State University, is used predominantly in construction and IT projects. It uses a formulaic assessment against a formal grid of self-proclaimed contributions to the business objectives. A high focus on metrics to drive a fast, objective, defensible selection. Selection is not based on validated capabilities. It doesn't validate the ability to achieve the desired outcomes. It doesn't look at strategic alignment. It doesn't look at effective pain gain sharing deals. All of things that make complex relationships survive the test of time. The RF partner in its original form meant each proponent worked through most of the details of the deal, and that proved to be too onerous for the bidders and the buyers. So it was revised to the RF Partner Plus, which is the version I shall describe in just a few minutes. We focus on the elements that really matter, the fit between the cultures and the key people, and how the solution can deliver joint objectives. Flip is the term used to describe how two companies that already work together decide to evolve their relationship to a vested relationship. Solution is already known because they're already delivering the service. It's assessing the cultural fit to confirm that this relationship should be elevated to a deep collaboration. And the final version is what Kate Vitasek calls the good old boys network, where relational selling to executives secures the business based on personal trust. This is neither competitive nor robust because the executives may move on. And you can find a white paper that describes this research more completely on the Vested website. But here's what it looks like when you roll it out. It concluded, perhaps not surprisingly, that the RF partner process drove a cost-effective, time-efficient, and competitive selection with an understanding of the solution, an explicit assessment of the cultural fit, a transparent and defensible process. And as you're working through it, you're making progress towards defining the final agreement. So the selection is based on the quality of the interactions as the teams align on a set of goals, develop a set of behaviors that will be lived, start formulating solution design, describe risk management and the compensation approach. And this sets the stage to align on clear objectives with explicit win-win philosophy through a durable working relationship that will stand the test of time. The arrangements are confirmed and completed, as well as the 10 other vested congratulations once the finalist has been selected. RF partner is probably too much for most preferred deals that might be addressed by an RFP or a flip from an approved supplier. So it really is for the more complex deals. So this is what the RF partner looks like. The phases are probably the same that you would use in any competitive process. So there's nothing groundbreaking there. What matters is what's done in each phase. And that's what we'll cover now. Phase one is where you start with all the possible suppliers and whittle them down to a managing number of real players. So use a RFQ or an expression of interest that many organizations already know how to administer, and make sure you focus on the unique required capabilities and the interest in a relational and performance-based deal. Not all suppliers are interested in that. Phase two is broken down into a concept phase where you use a mutual vision and behavioral norms. Weed out obvious poor cultural fits, bidders who are not in a collaborative mindset. The alignment stage allows the shortlisted players to dig deeper into risk sharing, how performance will be demonstrated and measured and paid for. I want to look at each one of these in detail. So job number one is aligning on what you really want. And this cartoon shows the challenge nicely. Everyone has an opinion. You will have to describe the outcome you want, not how it will be achieved. And that's the challenge here. We call this a vision, and we help you to describe how this vision will improve your situation. We call those the desired outcomes. To give you an example, when Vancouver Coastal Health Authority contracted out facility management services, they wanted faster turnaround of rooms between occupants, and they wanted to reduce hospital infections. When Dell Computer handed over their return operations, they wanted a faster triage of returned items at a reduced cost. When Microsoft outsourced finance to Accenture, they wanted a consistent accounting support model across all of their operations and countries, providing better and more timely data to empower Microsoft's remaining finance staff to become true partners of the business to inform management and strategy. When the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's Water for People program wanted innovative and lasting community solutions, they wanted to measure success in years of water and sanitation services provided for a given grant. When the Department of Environment sought to clean up Rocky Flats, one of the largest Superfund nuclear waste sites, they wanted it transformed into a wildlife reserve. Another health authority wanted to transform the seniors' resident dining experience. In-person dining in the dining room for social interaction, and a menu of choices to enhance quality of life, where isolation and malnutrition are major challenges. You can see very different objectives, but extremely important for the organizations that were struggling with them. Equally important is to have an understanding of why this is economically viable. I recommend thinking in terms of systems value. When you look far enough, there's generally plenty of value to go around. And this makes challenging endeavors worthwhile for everyone. So when the Department of Environment sought to clean up Rocky Flats, Kaiser Hill was able to decontaminate the site 65 years earlier at a cost that was $27 billion lower than the official 1995 base cost estimate. They were paid an exceptional bonus, and they shared that with the contractors and the employees. When the Highway I-35 St. Anthony's Bridge collapsed in 2007, it should have taken 5 years to rebuild, forcing 140 vehicles to deviate every day at a cost to the community estimated at $500,000 a day. It was rebuilt in 18 months, pouring concrete over the brutal Minnesota winters, a technical and aesthetic wonder, by the highest bidder, but at the best total value. Genco reduced Dell's cost per box and the amount of waste sent to that landfill by 50%. And we've seen at the very beginning, aligning on scope and goals is the biggest contributor to a successful relationship. Let's look at the qualification stage. So we suggest using an EOI, an expression of interest, or an request for information to reduce a long list of potentially qualified suppliers to a list of truly qualified suppliers, ensuring that they are willing to commit specialized resources and capabilities that are relevant to your challenge. Think of it as the A-team. The time required, it takes 2 to 4 months, and the whole process can take another 6 months. So up to a year with heavy involvement of senior bid and operations team, and many of them are going to be expected to stay behind to work on the contract once it's been accepted, and then to live in a situation of cultural and operational transparency that doesn't come natural to today's businesses, demonstrating a philosophy of increasing value over time. So like any complex outsourcing deal, it can take a full year to work out all the details before the money starts to flow. The bidders have to know that and be ready to stick with it for that amount of time. So we recommend that you share your evaluation criteria. These are the evaluation criteria of the University of Tennessee when they bid out their facilities management services. Many suppliers will not be familiar with Vested or RF Partner. So the University of Tennessee offers free online courses. So any unfamiliar with RF Partner or Vested can understand what will be expected. Use the responses from the RFI or EOI to settle on a short list of contenders, and we recommend no more than 5. Which brings us to the concept workshops. So the best 3 to 5, a bunch of formal workshops to test how well the company and their key staff work with your key staff, and to dig deeper into potential solution designs and how to make them work. So each workshop seeks to progress the deal definition while allowing the assessment of the cultural fit and capabilities, as well as informing and testing the solution design. So deal, design, and fit. It means that your buying organization will be undertaking several similar workshops in parallel with each of the shortlisting bidders. So yes, it does mean a big commitment of all of the stakeholders. So a good place to start these meetings is to review each party's sourcing model assessment, the 7 sourcing models we did before, and understand how they want the relationship and economic models to look like, and are the elements in those deals in alignment. So is this the right deal for each party? So this first set of workshops allows you to refine the solution focus, start finding a solution concept with each bidder, focusing on a joint objective, one that has real and significant benefits for both participants. Because you're in this for the long haul, you both have to get something out of it. So they will assign and keep assigned their best people. So dig down beneath the objectives to find 3 to 5 desired outcomes that are articulated in greater detail to the solution concept. And generally what happens, a handful of short and medium-term wins come up. They're called ponies, and they help show positive momentum, and they start providing benefits that can be shared as incentives. So whether it's the original DoD research or the WCC's 10 contracting pitfalls, all agree that a failure to agree on objectives and scope is the most common reason complex commercial relationships fail to deliver on their promise. I want to spend a little bit of time also talking about the other element of the statement of intent. And trust is of paramount importance in a relationship that's intended to last and to achieve the exceptional things together. So these are some of the elements that define fit. Trust. The parties will perform as expected. Innovation, that they will innovate in capabilities and take risks to collaborate towards a common goal. Communication, open and timely sharing of all relevant information. Decisions are made from all perspectives of the team, limiting opportunism and encouraging collaboration. What's in it for we? And focus on a common purpose, which drives task clarity and direction. Together, those elements form the basis of a compatibility and trust assessment that's used in most vested deals. The book Getting to We goes into greater detail, and the RF partner insists that the parties discover and jointly articulate what the 6 guiding principles mean to them in the relationship. And those are the 6 guiding principles. Reciprocity obliges the companies to make fair and balanced exchanges. Autonomy means they will abstain from using power to promote one party's self-interest at the expense of the other. Honesty obliges the party to tell the truth, both about the facts in the world and about their intentions and experiences. And it follows that individuals and organizations call out dishonest activity immediately. Loyalty, relationship first, a concept of relationship first thinking. And equity has 2 important components: proportionality and remedies. Proportionality means that one party may get a larger distribution of rewards than the other to compensate that party for taking greater risks or making investments. An equitable remedy allows the parties to come to a fair resolution and not some arbitrary 50-50 split. And integrity means consistency in decision-making and in actions. It says that what happened in the past says something about what can be expected to happen in the future. So those are the guiding principles. They are present in every vested deal. But as you discover more about your values, you may find other intended behaviors that are important to the relationship. As you investigate how these enduring principles apply to how you want to work together, other guidance may emerge, and that will ensure that the relationship flourishes. So these intended behaviors complement the guiding principles. And parties must go beyond just lip service. Where parties are familiar with each other, I like to organize role plays that show how behavior would be different if the guiding principles and intended behaviors were used to guide all of the interactions. Together, we call the vision, the desired outcomes, and the guiding principles the statement of intent. Each shortlisted provider presents a written concept submission that summarizes the opportunity as they see it, how they see it being achieved, and it includes their view of the statement of intent, including tentative solution design and the kind of ponies that can be expected. These concept design submissions are used to reduce the shortlist to 1 or 2. You may find that you really only have one contender. If you really only have one contender, don't keep a dark horse to keep things competitive, because at this stage, you're concerned with compatibility and solution design. Competitive pressures are not going to improve your outcome. So if there really is only one provider, cut to the chase and go forward with them. You'll waste annoying the also ran supplier, and you'll save your stakeholders an awful lot of effort. So we now have 2 credible contenders that will align well with the buyer's goal. Viable approaches, good fit, compelling solution design. How you decide which one to invest your limited time and opportunity in. Alignment workshops. They allow you to dig deeper with each one of them. I like to start with an independently prepared strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, a SWOT analysis, to inform where do you have to probe. And I think it's a good practice for both parties to come together and share what they found and start a real candid content on what the real agenda for this phase should be. So tactically, it makes sense to reconfirm and refine the statement of intent, tease out details on the desired outcomes, understand the value that can be realized, start working on the development of joint risk management plan, work out which party is the best one to bear the risk because they're able to mitigate it and manage it. Further investigate cultural compatibility. It's important to agree on the right scope with clear handoff points that provide maximum opportunity. The scope that you may have thought made sense may not make sense now that you're talking to an expert in what it takes to get things done. There's another key element that's exchanged at this point. It's called the guardrails. Now, if you were in a traditional power-based negotiation, you never share your no-go positions. But in a collaborative agreement, it's important to understand, is there a zone of possible agreement? And will it still be attractive to both parties? If you want both parties to engage enthusiastically while keeping an objective view of the risks, if one is pushed too close to its walk-away point, how are they going to react if things change just a little bit? Vested forces a discussion on no-go aspects of the deal. These can be minimal expected margin levels for providers, adherence to specific standards, intellectual property ownership, financial transparency, minimum levels of safety or environmental impact, or financial liquidity to be maintained. It's generally accepted that all relevant laws will be obeyed. So this isn't a guardrail, it's taken for granted. The pricing model is a comprehensive total cost of ownership over time with incentives when the desired outcomes are achieved. It aims to align progress against the desired outcomes with the economic benefits. Because it aims to drive transformational improvements. The base services are provided at half the industry standard margin. The provider is not expected to make enough money with the status quo. The point of the agreement is to achieve something exceptional. The service provision management is a separate item. So the provider assigns the A team and they remain committed. The value of the management fee is protected, even as savings significantly reduce the top line. And the third item is the incentive pool that's paid to the provider as the desired outcomes are delivered. So it's really important to understand the baseline in full cost. Pricing model is used to simulate outcomes for all parties when the desired outcomes are achieved. When Dell Computer sold its returns processing operations to Genco, which is now FedEx, the goal was to reduce the cost of processing returns, improve value retention, and reduce waste. Actual costs were passed through, which meant that every time FedEx found savings, their revenue fell, but they were paid a significant incentive for each threshold reached on a cost per box, and their management fee was maintained. When Accenture took on Microsoft's accounting processing, the cost would pass through until the details could be worked out as to what fit where. But the management fee was protected, and the management dynamic was protected by a very strong NDA to protect the other business Accenture had with Microsoft. And then the transformation incentives were paid as the finance function was transformed into a business partner, country by country, function by function. The governance model is developed to drive decisions down to the level that is closest to the issues. Vested recommends a two-in-the-box structure where the client and the provider, staff, handle issues jointly at the coalface. A formal escalation process raises concerns that cannot be resolved by the frontline workers, but only once both staff members agree they're unable to resolve the issue and management must intervene. So this drives conflict back down to its origin, speeds up decision-making, and it fosters a more constructive working relationship over time. This is the right time to start thinking about how multiple parties will manage the relationship. If you have an alliance of service providers to assemble a full span of capabilities, or you have a consolidation of operating divisions to increase volumes, you have a lot of stakeholders that may want to have decisions. You have to work out how those decisions are going to be made, how they're going to be arbitraged. The risk management plan is a formal recognition of everything that could possibly go wrong and how you'll avoid it happening or limit its impact, and how you'll deal with it if it happens anyway. So an important part of developing the relationship is how they're handling the risk management plan. Are they throwing everything that could possibly go wrong and throwing their arms up and saying, then we don't know what to do? Or are they really participating into how to mitigate and how to manage the risks together? It takes a high degree of faith in the capabilities and the commitment of the two organizations. So once an agreed economic model, governance model, risk management plan have been jointly prepared, the finalists are invited to submit a formal proposal. It's used to select the finalist with whom to negotiate the final vested agreement. In alignment with the classic exhortation, trust but verify, time is now taken to verify that the representations made in the proposal, to check references, demonstrate critical capabilities, and then we go on to the final step, which is the rest of the deal. And you do this with only one organization. So the rest of the deal means finalizing the scope. It means determining the workload allocation and taxonomy, which is who does what and where are the handoff points. As the solution detail gets into the details of how the solutions, the desired outcomes will be achieved and how progress will be measured, concrete metrics that tie to incentives are defined. So they have to be baselined. You have to set minimum thresholds, and then you have to set what are the thresholds for incentives to accrue. This is called the requirements roadmap, and it pulls the desired objectives into specific items and aligns with metrics and aligns with the economic model. The pricing model is then revised to include those incentives, and you define where the data is going to come from, where it's going, how we're going to make sure it's correct, how we're going to estimate it. And it's really important at this point to simulate what could happen if the incentives become very important. Imperative to avoid the situation where the incentives become so big that the buyer's senior management says, I'm not paying that. That would be wonderful to have to pay that amount of incentive because it means the relationship has been exceptionally successful. But you have to check. So governance includes the relationship and transformational management. And it's important now to make sure that the people who are sitting there have full legitimacy to make the decisions they'll be called on to make. Tiered structure, building two in the box, autonomous decision-making at the lowest possible, appropriate escalation, define responsibilities and authorities. And as I mentioned, that can be challenging when there are several stakeholders, such as an alliance of providers, and may have disparate perspectives that you have to be resolved before you get into the governance meetings. Can't have squabbles in the governance meeting. That's a waste of everybody's time. So make sure you take the time here to develop a working model, or you will pay dearly for it later. And many people have, hence my exhortation. It's really important to consider how relationship continuity will be assured because business priorities change and people come and go. A vested relationship must remain true to its original philosophy. So you have to have an onboarding plan for all new staff, particularly senior levels. Major risk to long-standing vested agreements is the flux of key staff replaced by people who do not necessarily understand how vested relationships work and what it takes for them to continue to deliver exceptional results. If you remember, the new sheriff in town is the caricature of that. And we talked about the exit plan. There will come a time when the relationship has run its course. Perhaps the transformation is completed. Perhaps the business no longer requires this service at the same level of excellence. Vested agreements plan out how the agreement will be wound down and ensures that the interests of both parties are taken care of. This might be orphaned estimates, orphaned investments made by the service provider. It might be continuity of access to critical data, critical capabilities, tools, or facilities. The discussion is going to be far more constructive when there's no acrimony and power plays to navigate. Both parties want an equitable agreement at the beginning, and far more so in a vested agreement. So we write that into the contract. And then special considerations and external requirements handle, for instance, specific regulations or standards or particular stakeholders that might have to be accommodated. So all of these 10 elements are assembled into a contract. And since it's been developed together, approval is a formality. That means you want the legal involved way at the beginning so they understand what the rationale is and how you got there. Of course, vested Way.com has a wealth of free white papers, case studies, and other materials. So we've reviewed why outsourcing is not going away, despite a pretty spotty track record. We've seen the promise of relational contracting and vested, which is the most collaborative form of commercial agreement. We've seen how it differs from transactional deals that many of you are familiar with. And we've seen a tool which will help you decide which one is right in every situation. I believe the 7 sourcing models will drive very powerful discussions between procurement and the business. We've looked at how complex outsourcing can be cost-effective and efficiently bid through the RF partner process. It's a 3-step process that builds towards a contract while giving the opportunity to assess potential suppliers on what really matters for you to succeed. Alignment on goals, cultural fit, solution design, mutual beneficial economic model, and a risk and relationship management throughout the relationship. I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions. If you think vested or RF partner is right for you, or if you want to use the 7 sourcing models in your business, just call or email. If you reached out on LinkedIn, add a note so I know why you want to connect, and check out my feed for a number of articles on competitive outsourcing. Thank you for your time today. I look forward to speaking with those of you who do reach out. Good luck. And remember, you get a lot more with honey than you do with vinegar. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.